Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Just a quick history to set the stage. At a younger age, I moved from Chicago to Baltimore to take a job with the federal government. When I started, I hit it off with a couple guys who've since become my best friends. We all lived together for about 5 years until one by one, we started moving on, get married and so on. One guy, we will call him John, left our place of employment to take a job as a Secret Service agent. As everyone went their separate ways, I thought I'd make a smart decision as a young professional and buy a house. In 2007, right before the financial collapse, needless to say, immediately after buying I was upside down big time and struggling. I had some other co-workers move in, but they only lasted about a year before abruptly moving out, leaving me scrambling to find a roommate, and thus setting the stage for my revenge story. I ended up posting on a bunch of venues to find a new roommate. One guy ended up far and above the best option. We will call him Russell. Russell was a military vet who had served a couple tours downrange and was now a sous chef at a local restaurant. He was easy to get along with, so I pulled the trigger in haste without doing the proper checks I should have. Primarily due to being in a desperate financial situation. The first sign something was off was when Russell moved in. He came with just a couple boxes and a TV. No bed, furniture, or anything else. The next clue came from me chatting him up about his time in the military. On the surface, he could talk the talk, but as I got more nuanced, his answers became more, well, wrong. He claimed to be a former Ranger, so he would have known the topics discussed. The final clue was a classic one. He started making excuses for rent payment a month too. By this time, I knew something was not right, so I politely told Russell to move out, which he did immediately. Once gone, I went to Home Depot to buy new locks, and much to my surprise, my debit card did not work. Come to find out, Russell had stolen a checkbook and cleaned me out. Every cent I had in my account was gone. And this time, I'm feeling a mixture of anger, fear of not being able to pay my mortgage, and disappointment in myself for not vetting him properly. When I ended up telling John, he was livid. He wanted every detail about the situation. Little did I know, John told all his co-workers, and they immediately opened the case on Russell. For those of you who don't know, the Secret Service also deals with financial/economic crimes, albeit normally on a much larger scale than my savings account. Within a few days, Secret Service agents had tracked down and interrogated and arrested all the individuals who had cashed the fake checks on Russell's behalf. One turned and advised Russell would be at the jerk's last resort at the Baltimore Inner Harbor that night. John and his crew changed into plain clothes and went there to wait. And lo and behold, Russell shows up and acts like he owns the place. He starts announcing that he was leaving on a deployment to Iraq, so he wanted to buy the entire bar drink, with my money, I should add. As he was standing there paying for everyone's drinks, John stood up and screamed, "Secret Service, you're under arrest." 3 agents slammed him down, cuffed him, and pulled him out where 2 black SUVs rolled up on the boardwalk to take him away. My other friends who had gone to observe said the entire restaurant paused in stunned silence for about 30 seconds. They take Russell in, and by this time John says he's bawling his eyes out. The best part of the ordeal was John made him add in his written confession. I routinely pretend to be an Army Ranger but have never served, before being taken to the city jail. Russell asked John, "Why did the Secret Service arrest me?" To which John replied, "Well, you robbed the wrong guy." Epilogue. The bank ended up giving me all the money back very quickly under a fraud claim. I ended up attending Russell's court appearance with John, where he took a plea and spent 6 months behind bars. Needless to say, I was a bit more careful in choosing my next roommate, who ended up being my wife, and we've been happily married for 5 years. Edit. I see a lot of comments about skepticism of how Russell was federally charged. I reached out to John and he advised they charge him on the state level due to the low scale of the crime, which explains why he went to city jail. I attended city court. I did a quick search and found this. Since I know you'll ask, 18 U.S.C. Section 13 allows for federal agencies to charge for state offenses, which would be offenses under state law in which federal territory resides. I, 21 female, am a dialysis patient who is handicapped, wheelchair-bound. I was going to turn 18 when dialysis began. I can't have a fistula, so I have a permacath. Now I have a tendency that my permacath gets blocked in 3 to 4 months. Now my permacath was blocked. The doctor suggested an anticoagulant injection for the blockage. The duration was 14 or 15 hours because it was pushed through a machine very slowly. The thing with anticoagulants is that it can start internal bleeding or some more dangerous stuff, which I don't remember now. I was in the ICU because of risks. I'm a patient who can be without my mom. She takes care of everything as I'm in a wheelchair. The nurses in ICU are particularly worse. They don't let relatives come inside, but my doctor had given permission for my parents. Now I was in the ICU and besides me was an elderly man with lots of pipes. He was awake, just couldn't speak. My mom was coming many times because I needed help. One particular nurse was very entitled. She used to think she was the owner of the ICU and she gets angry when my mom comes. Now injection was over and the ICU doctor and entitled nurse was chicken flow. I was lying down, the flow was perfect, and I was delusional because of other meds. The thing is that the entitled nurse left the permacath open and went along with the doctor. As I was delusional, I sat to drink water. As soon as I sat, blood started pouring out. I don't know how much blood came out, but I got dizzy. Oxygen dropped and I fainted. The man who was in a side bed started hitting his hand on his bed and started making noise. The entitled nurse came running. She saw and started closing permacath. The damage was done. The whole bed, my clothes, all things were filled with blood. Same moment my mom came, and the conversation went as follows. What happened? My mom asks. She started bleeding. The entitled nurse tells her. How? You should explain to her to not sit anytime she wants. What? She has back problems, she can't lie straight and she's delusional. First of all, go out. You are not allowed here. I have permission to be here. Not my permission, get out this moment. My mom went out and the entitled nurse started cleaning before my doctor came. She forcibly removed me from my bed and cleaned everything. Later when I gained consciousness, my parents explained what happened. Next day, I got discharged. And when I reached home, the first thing I did was complain about her on the hospital's website. She was called in and was fired. People came to know that there were many patients complaining about her as well, as they have also suffered because of her carelessness. But she always used to clean everything before doctors came, and the ICU doctors used to support her. At least in this story, there is a happy ending. I work in a place with a deeded garage parking. Had one sweet old lady, I will call her Granny, who owned a Mini Cooper. Another couple who rented a unit did not have a parking spot and took to planting their economy car in her spot. When Granny complained, the renters would just say that they were entitled because there were so many empty parking places, so Granny could park somewhere else. What the hell does they not get about deeded parking? This continued until the day the sweet old lady decided to not be so sweet, pulled her car in front of the two renters' car and parked bumper to bumper, put a note on their car saying parking in this space is $150 a day. Please leave a check with the concierge. So the two grifters' renters showed up at my desk complaining about their car being blocked off and actually expected me to tow Granny's car off. I had to re-explain that deeded parking meant that I could not tow a car from Granny's spot anymore. Then I could rearrange furniture in her apartment. It's her land, she owns it. You abandoned your car on her property. Talk to Granny. So after 20 minutes or so of the grifters' renters whining, I called Granny even though it was early in the morning. She came down to the desk in her housecoat and slippers with her dog in tow. They begged her to move her car. Granny told them it would be $150. Leave the check with the concierge. They kept whining, and then she told him it would be an extra $50 for waking her up in the morning cause they claimed an emergency. Then they asked her how long before she left the garage. Granny told him, "Dearies, I'm retired. I'll leave my spot when I'm ready." And the price just went up to $150 a day plus $50 for waking me. And that will be in cash. Leave the envelope with the concierge. I am walking my dog and I'll move my car when I have your rental fee in hand. Not only did the renters not park in her spot, but word got around and I didn't have to deal with that issue for another 2 years. Someone just linked me to this up, and oh boy do I have a story for you guys. I'm still proud of this to this day. All names are changed. A few years ago I was working in a job I really enjoyed with a team I really gelled well with. There were about 5 of us working on the same portfolio of projects in different roles, and every single team member was just cream of the crop. Incredibly good at what they do. I can't overemphasize how satisfying it was to work with such an incredibly competent, likable group of people. In this job, instead of getting the Sunday night blues, I would get excited thinking about the work I would be doing the next day and planning how we would solve the complex problems together. It was like a series of logic puzzles. Yes, I realize I'm a huge nerd. I promise I also had a life outside of work. The one downside there is always a downside to this job was Steve. Steve was not in a supervisory line for me or any of my team members, but he was about 3 levels above us and very senior. He'd been there for years and was tight with senior leadership. Steve was also a mega creep. He said extremely inappropriate things to young women in the office, and he apparently wasn't averse to being handsy. Though, as far as anyone knew, that was as bad as it had gotten. The women in the office all knew to steer clear of him. My first week on the job, the Whisper Network made sure I knew. Never be alone with Steve. Sexual harassment is difficult to document, and no one wanted to risk their career and put a target on their back going after a big guy like him. So he just got away with it for years. So for a couple of years I followed this advice. There were a few instances of Steve saying incredibly uncomfortable things to me in passing, but for the most part I managed to avoid him. Then I found out that my teammate Rob had gotten on Steve's radar. For context, Rob is non-neurotypical and has some minor tic-ish behavior. He's also shy and easily spirals into social anxiety when put in uncomfortable situations. So one evening at our team's informal weekly happy hour after work, Rob lets it slip that Steve's been giving him a hard time. The rest of us are like, whoa, wait, what? Because Steve never interacts with staff at our level. Except to creep on women, we basically make Rob tell us everything. Basically, for the last few weeks, Steve had been bullying Rob, making fun of his tics, and mimicking his way of speaking back to him. He's also been asking Rob how he can possibly be competent to do his job and implying he's a pity hire. Once he called him an R-word. It is clear Steve is seeking out Rob for this because again, there is really no reason for him to interact with our team. Rob has been having horrible anxiety over this situation and has had bad insomnia and stomach issues since Steve started targeting him. And not that it bears repeating, but just to reiterate, Rob is a beast at his job, and a genuinely good guy. At this point I am seeing red. We all were. We tell Rob to go to HR, that his neurological issues put him in a protected ADA class, that he could get Steve in big trouble. Rob panics and says he can't do that, begs us not to tell anyone at work, and says he wishes he hadn't said anything. We assure him that we won't say anything if that's what he wants, but we are all very distressed. I leave the bar fuming, just thinking, okay, that's it. Screw you, Steve. You're going down. I can't tell anyone about what's happening to Rob because I promised him as much, so I start my own paper trail. I start baiting Steve, and I don't mean I behave in any suggestive manner or lead him on. I just stop avoiding him and even initiate contact myself. I am him. through the company's IM system very professionally and politely asking if a big client will be staying on through the next project cycle. And the floodgates open. He starts sending me outrageously inappropriate IMS. I mostly do not respond, but I occasionally keep him going by sending extremely literal responses to his innuendo-laden questions or pretending not to understand something suggestive he's saying. Sometimes when he clarifies, I'll outright say, "This isn't appropriate," or "This is making me uncomfortable," or "Please do not say things like that, Steve." But he steamrolls right over me. During this time, I've also been seeing him more in person around the office, and he often says gross stuff to me in person as well. A lot of it not just inappropriate, but bizarre and nonsensical. And every time this happens, I immediately go back to my desk and write down what he said, the date and time, and the names of any witnesses. After about a month and change of this, I compile my creep journal with printouts of the IM conversations and take them to my HR rep. I asked to file a sexual harassment complaint against Steve. As soon as the word sexual harassment leave my mouth, my rep instantly gets the head of HR and two other reps, and they go through my evidence with me and ask me a ton of questions. The head of HR assures me they will take my complaints very seriously and asks if I know of any women around the office who have had similar issues with Steve. I am able to give them several names. They send me on my way, and 2 weeks later my rep formally reaches out to me and lets me know that Steve has been let go. Much jubilation is had around the office. It took a couple of months for me to piece together the whole story, but basically after my complaint, HR started following up with the names I gave them. Those are witnesses to my in-person encounters with Steve and the other women he'd harassed. They corroborated what I told HR, and then through them, word started spreading around the office that HR was conducting a sexual harassment investigation against Steve. This emboldened at least 15 different women who've been biting their tongues about Steve for ages to come forward and tell their own Steve stories. The worst story was from a junior staff member who Steve had sexually assaulted at a company party the year prior. During all of this, IT had been asked to go through Steve's emails and IMS. And this had not only been used to validate my printouts as legitimate, but IT had found a ton of additional incriminating stuff in Steve's correspondences. Somewhat frustrating, Steve received an extremely generous severance package as part of his termination. But on the bright side, word got around the industry quickly as Steve was poisoned at that point. No company would touch him with a 10-foot pole. The last time I thought to snoop on his public social media pages, he was listing himself as an independent consultant in our industry, which I seriously doubt he's actually doing. And based on his public Facebook page, he's doing a couple of MLMs, so that should kill off whatever savings he has in short order. I don't work with Rob anymore, but I did recently attend his wedding. He's extremely happy with his new wife, who is a sweet and lovely woman, and he's doing really well in his career. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.